Today I get to finally share my full review on Chrono Odyssey. No sugarcoating, just an honest, direct review of the game. We're going to be covering everything the game has to offer, including my personal thoughts and opinions, of course. But before we begin, real quick, be sure to follow me on Twitch. I'm streaming almost every single day. If I get keys for the beta test, I will be giving them out via Twitch, so definitely come stop by. Now, before we begin, this review, as well as every other review that's being published this week, will be based off of an older beta build. This build is a very similar build to what we tested back in February and will be pretty much the same build you guys get to test on the 20th of this month. I know for a fact that there are some significant things based on our feedback that have already changed but will not be seen. Fortunately, however, not allowed to say what those changes are. So despite finally being able to reveal almost everything, there are still some things that I can't talk about. This review is going to be strictly based off of the build we will be seeing this month. Some of my criticisms in this very video have already been addressed. I want to be very upfront here. In this video, I'm going to be very honest, calling out the good and the bad as directly as I can. I want everyone to know that this is a game that I'm super excited about and I see a lot of potential in. We'll be going over my honest thoughts at the end of the video here, but I genuinely want to see this game succeed, and I think there's a real chance it could. But the only way it gets there is if we give real feedback, which includes calling out the issues. Not just in this video, but generally speaking. Now, with that out the way, some context. Kakao invited a select number of content creators to check out, review their game, and share their honest thoughts. We had just over 2 days to play this time around, and I believe I had around 30 hours this testing phase according to Steam, with another nearly 40 hours or so in the previous test, giving me roughly around 70-ish hours of total playtime now. This build allowed us to experience the first 15 to 25 levels worth of content, so just the early game. Let's begin with what Chrono Odyssey is. Chrono is an action combat dark fantasy open world MMORPG that leans towards a sandbox. We'll be talking about the content that's in Chrono in more detail later in the video. This is an MMO with a more PvE focus, but will include non-forced PvP as well. One of the biggest distinguishing factors for Chrono is that it has a more Souls-like feel to it, to the point where trailers make it seem more like a single-player action RPG rather than an MMO. But make no mistake, this is a full-fledged MMO. It really is the closest thing to what a Souls-like game would be if it were an MMO. And you really see this and feel this when it comes to the combative movement. By the way, when it comes to that movement, I personally feel like the inertia is a bit high, and I see it feeling quote-unquote heavy for a lot of people, especially when jumping. Forward momentum is pretty annoying to deal with. Other than this, in a general sense, I feel like they did a pretty good job delivering us an actual Souls-like MMO that's an MMO first. Now, with all that general stuff out the way, let's get into more of the details, starting with the graphics and the look of the game. The first thing that stood out for everyone was obviously the graphics. Run on Unreal Engine 5, Chrono delivers very impressive graphical fidelity. There are just some really impressive scenes and looks, but as amazing as the character models and world look, there are some clear deficiencies in this department in the live game. For example, the lighting needs to be worked on. When the sun is out, the zones look amazing, but then look significantly worse during certain weather patterns or times of the day. There are also some areas that are just way too dark or way too saturated with smog or lights. Character faces as well. They look pretty good at certain times of the day and angles, but at other times they look completely different in a bad way to what you created in the character creation. You can see an example here. The character looks completely different in the character sheet compared to the actual in-game. While we're on the subject of character looks, I also feel the customization when it comes to the characters actually lacks quite a bit. At first glance, the models look great and there seems to be a ton of options for adjustments, but it just never really felt like we were able to make exactly what we wanted to. What I'm saying is that in some games, you can literally recreate a celebrity, for example. In Chrono, it's not really possible to do that. Now, with that said, you are able to make some crazy abominations, Expect to see characters like this in your game for sure. I also want to mention that there is no gender lock, nor do certain classes lock you into a certain type of class-themed look. I think this is probably the best part about the character customization. Actually, no, I take that back. The best part is definitely the sliders, the body sliders. These body sliders, yeah, definitely the biggest W. Let's talk about the structure of the game. When you begin, the game will lead you on a series of quests that guide you to your first Chrono Gate, which is your solo Souls-like boss fight at around level 4. This process only takes around 10 to 20 minutes tops, and most people will probably not be able to actually beat the boss unless you're using crossbow. Yes, it's actually quite challenging. Really good first boss encounter. This fight, by the way, really hooked me on the game because not only are you immediately put to the test, but you're also being exposed to a more meaningful combat experience early on, rather than just mindlessly spamming buttons on easy mobs. Despite barely having skills at this point, it still felt really fun. Whether or not you clear this Chrono Gate from this moment on, your progression is up to you. There is no MSQ other than to go to the next Chrono Gate and kill that boss. You'll have 3 more, by the way, a total of 4 in the beta test. It's up to you if you want to take on these bosses with no gear at low level, or if you want to gear up and then come back to it. After beating or leaving the first Chrono Gate, you'll now focus on leveling up your weapon masteries and gearing up to get stronger. This can be done in a multitude of ways, and the game encourages you to choose the content or progression path that's more fun for you. There is no one single way to do this, so let's go over your options. You have your side quests throughout different areas that will give you experience and rewards, such as gear and gold. You have dynamic subjugation zone quests that pop up in certain areas that also do the same. You have bounties, which are one-time PvE kill hunt quests that will have you hunt down a special named mob. These reward you with big experience along with a bounty currency you can use to purchase limited items and gear. You can also choose to life skill, go out in the world, gather materials directly, then craft everything. Gathering, by the way, also grants you experience. You can even just run straight to the NPC that gives you a quest to get your mount if you want that out the game. There is a big emphasis on freedom and exploration in Chrono Odyssey, and what you'll learn at this stage is that no matter where you go or what you do, you're going to run into something you can do or is worth doing. For example, after the Chrono Gate, I went to get my mount. On my way, I ran into a ton of materials that I could harvest to craft my next set of gear when I got back to town. I cleared some dynamic zone quests along the way, giving me some extra experience and loot. Discovered some field boss locations and solo dungeon locations along the way, all of this giving me meaningful progression and on the way to my main objective that I chose for myself. In this case, getting them out. This was hands down the biggest draw for me personally in Chrono Odyssey, and is the reason why I believe that this game has one of the best canvases for an MMO I've seen in recent years. Whether you're solo or in a party, expect to actually go on an adventure when you leave town. There are a lot of random things in the world you'll come across, making every zone worth having a look, or even a second look. It may be a zone you discover having an abundance of specific tier 2 resources, or a zone that can spawn a hidden boss. Here we discovered when you killed 3 or 4, can't remember exactly, specific mobs, it spawns a hidden elite boss. Things could certainly be different at the end game. When I asked the producer directly about whether or not this freedom would remain at the end game, he did confirm that this is what is intended rather than the being another daily homework game. What PvE and PvP content can we expect with Chrono? When it comes to PvE, expect anywhere from 3-player dungeons to 5-player dungeons all the way to 10-player raids. These dungeons will reward you with the usual loot and experience. The only group dungeons we've been able to do are the 3-man dungeons, which felt pretty decent for the first introductory group dungeon. Loot wasn't bad, wasn't crazy. Unfortunately, in the most recent test, the second half of the dungeon, including the final boss, was locked out. I did get to experience the dungeon in full in the previous test, but can't comment on it considering this version is the only one we can talk about right now. There's also other solo or smaller instance content, such as Trials, which is a big gauntlet-like solo dungeon where you'll go through multiple rooms to ultimately fight the final boss. I should add that there is a currency attached to the Trials, specifically allowing you to purchase additional goods as rewards. These goods ranging from permanent stat potions to gear itself. I should mention though, these Trials are limited, seeing as you need keys to enter. And if you die at any point, you exit the dungeon and miss out on whatever else was ahead of you. I know I mentioned that I wasn't going to bring up what specific things have been changed or addressed in the latest build, but the Trials is one of them. You can see a pretty clear difference in the newer updated version in the official videos Chrono put out compared to what we have and what we will experience in our beta. Next, you have time portals that are little quick, easy instance dungeons that I wouldn't really call a real dungeon. Soloable, by the way. To enter these, you'll also need a specific key, which generally drops from bosses or elites throughout the world. These provide you with unique loot, like gems you can socket into your gear, which upgrades your skill levels. Don't expect a stellar experience when it comes to the time portals, at least early stages of the game, because they're pretty brain dead. A going through the motions like instance. You'll also have solo dungeons that are labeled as Labyrinths, which is usually a mini-game puzzle-like instance with a boss at the end. These are absolutely worth doing, considering you get permanent stat upgrades or points on top of the experience. These solo dungeons, in my opinion, are pretty lackluster when it comes to the overall experience. If I'm going to be honest, they feel a bit bland. They feel jank, especially with the current inertia with the player movements. Also, some of the mechanics with the arrows shooting from the statues are just kind of dumb. Literally can't even dodge them. Right now, these solo Labyrinth dungeons are just things you do because you have to. They definitely need work. I mean, you're watching it right now and yeah, exactly. Aside from the instance stuff, you also have open world encounters with field bosses or world bosses you can group up for. These bosses will of course have a wide range of difficulty, some being pretty easy while others being hard. This boss, for example, was an insanely difficult one for our size and our gear, but it was actually really fun because of how challenging it was. I was expecting the world boss, field boss content to be kind of brain dead content like most world bosses are in MMOs, but these were surprisingly fun. I think mainly because of the punishment you take when you get hit and the combat just being a pretty fun experience. Of course, once you out-level these bosses, they'll become a joke, but the on-level ones, surprisingly fun. PvP wise, the only thing available right now are 1v1 duels and the ability to flag for PvP. 1v1 duels are really scuffed at the moment, mainly because when starting the duel, a pillar spawns in the middle that has collision and is able to break line of sight. The dueling area is also very, very small. You don't recover HP after completing the fight, and you have to wait 60 seconds between finishing duels. All just really bad. When it comes to flagging, players have the option to flag up for PvP in town and venture out and combat anyone else that is flagged for PvP. The problem with this system, aside from the fact that no one actually flags because there is no current incentive to do so, is that you can't even party up with friends to do this. It's just you versus everyone. The current infrastructure of PvP severely lacks, but the real content is expected to come with the full launch of the game, primarily in the form of open world PvP conflict zones in Eden, a PvEvP zone that has real rewards attached to it. The devs also said they could easily implement instance-based PvP like 3v3 or 5v5 arenas and would monitor feedback given in the upcoming beta test. So if you want those things implemented, be sure to provide that feedback. Other than the actual content, you're probably wondering what PvP itself feels like. Well, there definitely seems to be some stuff that's just broken, some stuff that seems underwhelming, certainly a good amount of scuffery, but honestly, it's kind of fun. We flagged up and headed out in the world to do some fights, and all in all, most of us had a lot of fun, mainly because of the combat. CCs don't lock you into place for 9 years, leading you to get one shot. They're important, but also short. Whether you're ranged or melee, you have to actually land your abilities. Blocks and dodges do exactly that. You can completely negate an incoming CC or skill by blocking or dodging. Combat may not have been BDO ninja levels of speed, but it definitely didn't feel slow. Target lock is available, but honestly, not reliable at all. It's bad. Terrible for range, and certainly won't be used by good melee players. My group and I universally feel like there is some actual potential with the PvP if they can balance it out, clean it up, and make some good content around it. Speaking of target lock, let's talk about the combat. The overall foundation of the combat is action combat that leans Souls-like. This means iframe dodge rolls that consume stamina and can cancel you out of your attacks, basic attacks that are more meaningful, locked-in attack animations, taking hits being actually more punishing, not allowing players to just mindlessly greet attacks. For the record, you have 4 abilities on your hotbar for each weapon, totaling to 8. You have a basic attack LMB, left mouse button, special attack or ability, depending on your weapon, on your RMB, right mouse button, your Chronotector skill, which you can look at more as an alt, and up to 4 active mastery skills, only 1 being available during the beta, 15 total abilities you can press. While the combat is certainly on the slower side, it's not actually that slow. Sure, you're locked into animations, but the abilities themselves don't feel overly heavy and clunky as some Souls-like games do. I actually really like the combat personally, to the point where I'd say it's one of my favorite parts of the game. It's slow enough for anyone to quote-unquote get in the beginning, but there is definitely a higher skill ceiling for those who really want to maximize their efficiency, and the more you do that, the more engaging the combat becomes. Sure, you can just spam all your abilities and basic attack and deal damage, have fun, but actually trying to execute a proper rotation while fighting will be a much bigger challenge. Not to mention, you literally have headshot modifiers if you're playing crossbow or bow, adding an aim element to it. Weapon swapping is a big point of discussion when it comes to combat. I'm not the biggest fan of weapon swapping myself, but Chrono does a pretty good job with it, and it's actually growing on me as a result. For what it is, it's done pretty well. The transition between swapping is very smooth and quick, and the more comfortable you are, the better you'll get, and the more you'll notice yourself swapping back and forth. All weapon combinations have benefits and buffs on swap, encouraging players to go back and forth. The swap itself is kind of an ability sometimes in and of itself. For example, the swap could proc an effect, giving you back a good amount of your resource, allowing you to use more skills. Most weapon effects also are tied to the weapon in your hand, meaning a special passive you may get from your twin axes, for example, won't be applied when you swap to your chain blades. Not all, though. There are some abilities and buffs that do persist. As mentioned in the PvP section, there is a target lock feature, but honestly, I found it to be more of an inconvenience than anything. If you aim your character or mouse, you'll land your hits. Simple as that. The target lock is definitely better in PvE, but even then, with how big a lot of these monsters are, the way the camera pans while in target lock, the camera will auto zoom in a lot of the times, making it annoying to see. And personally, I just turn this feature off 99% of the time. Overall, I personally did enjoy the combat, and I feel like a big part of that comes from the class design. Which is the next section, classes. This is going to be a relatively short section because one of my upcoming videos is going to be a full class breakdown video. With that said, there are 6 classes in Chrono Odyssey, each having access to 3 weapons. Only 3 of these classes will be available in the upcoming beta test: Swordsman, Ranger, and Berserker. Paladin, Assassin, and Sorcerer are the other classes which I was able to play for a day in the first beta test, but I can't share anything due to the fact that it wasn't made available for this current version. Each of these 3 classes, the Swordsman, Ranger, and Berserker, are quite different from one another, and I feel like Chrono has done a pretty good job with the basic identity of these classes. Each class resonated with people, and there aren't any that just felt garbage to everyone. I've personally played them all, and I originally thought it was a swordsman angle for me, but after trying Berserker, I'm kind of sold on Berserker now. I also thought, by the way, I could be a ranger maid for a little while when I was trying ranger. Of these 3 classes, though, I probably have to say that Berserker was it for me personally. The Chain Blades is just really sick, and the Twin Axes also just has a pretty solid kit. Let's talk about the monetization next. The TLDR is that Chrono Studios has announced that they will never have any pay-to-win elements, and they will only monetize cosmetics and a battle pass. However, in another interview, they stated that they could also monetize quality of life convenience goods, sparking some backlash due to the inconsistencies. The only thing I can speak to is what I've been told personally and what I've experienced off camera in person. And that's that this team seems very much against pay to win and even continue to double down on their anti-pay to win stance off camera. And yes, I asked about the specific loopholes, all of which they said no to. They all genuinely seemed excited about being the first non-pay to win Korean MMO. Because I'm a glass is half full kind of guy, and because of the IRL interaction I had with them, and there were people of power present, I'm inclined to believe them. Would I bet my life savings on it? Of course not. But it doesn't matter whether we believe them or not. It's on them to prove it to us. But the convenience items are another story. If they do add in convenience items, I feel they should have for sure disclosed that in my interview. But again, regardless, we're all going to find out eventually. And if they do end up selling some convenience items like character slots or anything consistent with Path of Exile, I don't really give a shit. It's still a massive W in my eyes. Okay, so my overall honest thoughts on the game. As mentioned before, I love the canvas of the game. I love the combat. Classes feel great. Game is supposed to not have pay to win. Thematically, it's right up my alley. How can I not be excited about this game? However, there are 2 massive concerns I have with this game, assuming monetization is of course what they claim it to be. The first being how good the endgame loop will be. It's already been stated that this game isn't going to be one that has some insane grind and crazy chase items. From a progression standpoint, I really hope they have enough build variety to keep players engaged, chasing multiple sets of gear as the gear incentive to continue. Downside to not having a grindy game is that you have no vertical progression when you hit gear cap. The day-to-day activities have to feel good and fun to do. There needs to be purpose. The endgame raids have to be peak. Quality content. The only thing we know is how it feels in the early game, and that is just never the full picture. The end game is significantly more important. The second massive concern are the bugs. How will the game performance be? How bug-ridden will this game be? In its current state, the game has a lot of issues when it comes to the bugs. There's just way too many small bugs that diminish the polish of the game. Most of these aren't even game-breaking. Just a lot of small annoying ones. For example, my character's hair randomly disappearing, not being able to interact with things when I'm trying to harvest, my character having to walk into position to harvest or interact with something for whatever reason, party/raid systems bugging out, even being pulled into the Void Gate, which is a solo instance my friend is doing because we're in party. Somehow that happened. The list goes on. None of these things are game killers per se, but when there's enough of them around, it certainly scuffs the experience quite a bit. If I had to describe what Chrono Odyssey feels like right now, I would say that it feels like a wannabe AAA game developed by an indie studio that does actually have the chance to be a AAA game, but currently lacks the polish of being one. If this was an alpha or early beta, I'd say it's looking pretty good. If this is what we're going into launch with, then honestly, we're in some serious trouble. I love how receptive the Chrono team is with feedback. I love the canvas. I think the potential is for sure there. But for now, that's all it is, potential. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's some serious potential, in my opinion. Like I said, there were a lot of things that they have already changed, which we can't talk about, but the version you all will be playing this month will be consistent with everything I've described in this video. And that's going to pretty much do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, come follow me on Twitch. I'm going to be streaming a lot of Chrono Odyssey, and I will be giving away as many keys as I possibly can on Twitch if I get some keys. I'll see you guys in the next video.